Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Don Coyne, the current CEO of ANZ Biochar Industry Group, acronym ANZBIG, and I'm joined today by Sam Sagami, our Cluster Manager. On today's episode, we will be discussing ANZBIG's Code of Practice currently being developed. We will look at the objectives of the code, common definitions used in the industry, feedstocks that can be used, best practice for production, handling and packaging, the different grades under the code and their uses, as well as achieving ANZBIG certification.
And to help us discuss the topic, we have Nigel Murphy, our chair, who is passionate about developing a strong biochar sector in Australia and New Zealand. He is the founder and director of Earth Systems and Cyclic Carbon, companies that have been actively innovating and commercializing technology in the Cleantech sector over the last 25 years, including biochar. His biochar experience covers product development, IP protection, capital raising, commercialization and market development. He has degrees in environmental and earth sciences and experience in working in Australia, China, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. He has provided technical advice to companies, governments, financial institutions, and aid sector in environmental science, clean tech, and the environmental management. He is an honorary life member of the Environment Institute of Australia and New Zealand and was the founder chair of the Certified Environmental Practitioner Scheme for Australia and New Zealand. And he is currently the chair of Victorian Cleantech Cluster.
Welcome, Nigel.
Thanks, Don.
So first question, Nigel, why did you want to develop this code and what are its objective? What's its objective?
Yeah, look, Don, it's a good question. I think that the key reason is to give our stakeholders, and they are consumers, regulators, and producers, both guidance and confidence on how to safely and sustainably produce and use biochar in the Australian and New Zealand context. So that's the key reason.
Okay, great.
And I suppose from there, you know, the objective of the code is really to succinctly convey what producers and users need to do to achieve that safe and sustainable outcomes.
And what are some of the key definitions that new stakeholders will need to familiarize themselves with?
Yeah, look, I think that they're always there's a few things that are important in the code in terms of definitions. Obviously, the definition of biochar is very important, and you know there are different definitions in different parts of the world regarding biochar. I think we've chosen some pretty standard, accepted definitions of biochar. Probably one of the key ones is that it has to have an organic carbon content greater than 30% and a molar hydrogen to carbon ratio below 0.7. So that's one key definition. Another, you know, important concept is the impurities, and you know, potentially you can have good impurities in biochar, but here we've defined impurity as potentially undesirable material found in the biochar or the biochar feedstock, and that compromises the quality or usefulness of the biochar. So that's a key definition. Another is you know, the concept of processed versus unprocessed feedstock. So people are looking at turning a lot of different biomass into biochar. So, and that can vary from totally unprocessed wood or woody biomass through to wood that's been turned into timber and used as timber, or biosolids, or other organic waste streams. So what we've tried to do is identify a distinction between processed and unprocessed, because if material is processed, it's probably got a greater probability of getting impurities or having impurities in that feedstock. So that's another important definition concept. And then another important part of the code, or a vital part of the code, is sustainability, and making sure that the feedstock is from a sustainable source is vitally important in this code.
Okay, so that sort of leads into the next question, Nigel, which is what will the sustainable feedstock requirements be for meeting the code?
Yeah, well, I think again that in unprocessed feedstock, say wood feedstock must be sourced from legally harvested wood that is not being harvested at a rate which is not sustainable. So we need to make sure that we're not clearing forests to produce biochar. We're using material that's woody material that's produced in a sustainable fashion. And then I think in terms of the other aspect of reactive impurities, such as plastics, rubbers, and some metals, they're undesirable impurities, and we need to make sure that they are removed to the greatest extent possible. Same with things like stones. We need to make sure that that they are removed also to the greatest extent possible. And some woody materials can have reactive coatings and timber treatments, including copper chrome arsenic treatment, and we should avoid using those materials in most circumstances, to ensure that the quality of the biochar is safe and at a grade where safely.
We just missed out on that last bit, Nigel. Would you mind just repeating that last little section there?
Okay, I was talking there about making sure that timber treatments such as laminates, glues, paints, varnishes, copper chrome arsenic, they are an issue. So we need to make sure that is managed also in a safe and sustainable way.
Sure. Okay.
Also important, Sam, is making sure that if we're producing a biochar which sequesters carbon, that the transport over long distances for biochar production is avoided. And also important for sustainability is that we have good record keeping as well.
Great, thank you. And could you just outline the best practices when it comes to sustainable production of biochar?
Yeah, look, I think there are a number of production techniques for biochar. It's usually in a pyrolysis or gasification environment. but we need to make sure that they're designed and operated to international standards, so that and they must be applicable to health, safety, and environmental requirements in the place of operation. So that's number one, is that, you know, production must be according to the law of where it's being produced. The other thing, you know, what best practice is it's also making sure that you know, you're going above and beyond where you can. And so, you know, in the production process, obviously a key thing is not just ensuring that the biochar is a good quality, but ensuring that air emissions, any emissions to water, are also not harmful to the community and environment. And quite frankly, that's not hard to achieve. You know, it's something that the technology has developed, which can certainly do that. So, with production, best practice is making sure that the environment is looked after, but it's making sure that you know, fossil fuels aren't used for heating during pyrolysis. Sometimes fossil fuels need to be used at the startup, but you know, it really, after that, the production of biochar should be self-sustaining. And also, it's making sure that the you know, that the byproducts of say pyrolysis process, which heat is one, should be utilised. So we need to make sure that when we are producing biochar, we're utilising all the good things that can be produced. Well, I think another aspect of important in production is keeping good records of production. So making sure that it's that record keeping is done in a professional manner, and that each batch of biochar, it's known, you know, when it was produced and what feedstock it was produced from, and making sure that there's good quality assurance and verification.
Thanks, Nigel. So that's the production side of things. So could you talk to the best practices for sustainable use and the different grades of the biochar under the code?
Yeah, well, what we've done, Don, is we've set up 4 grades for biochar, and they really reflect the source of the biomass that is used to produce the biochar. So our first grade is a premium grade, and you know, that's a grade which has very, very few impurities, and you know, that grade is suitable for feeding to livestock, as well as other agricultural purposes. So it's a very, very pure biochar, and you know, really that can only be produced from a feedstock which is untainted woody or woody biomass type material. So that's what we've defined as a premium grade, and then we split that premium grade into high and medium and low carbon, because different feedstocks have different carbon content. So, for example, rice straw has a very different carbon content to wheat straw. Rice straw has a higher silica content. So we do also identify different carbon levels, because obviously the carbon level is important for the sequestration of carbon. Higher carbon sequesters more carbon. So and then after that we identified a standard grade, and the standard grade is biochar that's more suitable for general agricultural application. Again, impurity levels are very low in this material. But we've also recognised that that there's also biochar can be produced from things like biosolids, which is the solid fraction of sewage treatment, and those biosolids can produce very good biochar, but it may not be suitable. Well, it's unlikely to be suitable for animal feed. It might have higher metal content, for example. But some of those biochars could be used for other purposes where, you know, the safely used. So, for example, in bitumen, there's a lot of carbon that's used in bitumen, and a lot of that carbon comes from fossil fuels, and potentially that could be replaced by biochar, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the lowest impurity biochar to be used safely. So we've identified 2 other industrial grades of biochar that are suitable for use in more industrial applications, such as for asphalt or concrete, those types of applications.
Great. And what are you proposing for best practice when it comes to the packaging and handling of biochar, and why is that important?
Yeah, that's identified in the code. So, you know, biochar is a carbon material, and it's produced under high temperatures. So it's important that that any fire risk is eliminated, is completely mitigated. So, you know, one way of doing that is to fully quench the biochar in water immediately after production to reduce that risk. So handling is really important to ensure that risks are appropriately managed, and you know, we recommend that all producing sites must have a site safety analysis and risk assessment, and have all the appropriate safety, health and safety documentation. And obviously in Australia and New Zealand, that's a legal requirement as well. So you know, the safety side is a very, very key element. And then, you know, with packaging, it's important that the packaging is done in a way that provides our users and consumers with clear and straightforward information about the product. So, you know, we need to make sure that if there are any you know, hazards associated, if there's very fine particles or dust particles, that's communicated. If someone's certifying under the code, then the grade of biochar and where it's produced is important. People want to know where their biochar was produced, type of feedstock, you know, what material was used to produce the biochar. And also importantly, the carbon content is another aspect that, you know, must be conveyed to consumers. So that's, again, that's another very important part of the code.
Yeah, great. And I think it really doesn't leave anything for chance, or these measures that are in the code. It allows it to be very precise and, you know, something that people can just follow step by step. And then, like you said, the consumers and the users, they know how their biochar has been made, the carbon content, like you said, and everything's very clear and open.
Exactly, Sam. And, you know, one other element with the code is that it won't be static. We will continue to improve the code as we move forward, and as we get feedback from producers and users and regulators, we will try to, you know, incorporate that feedback into the code to make it a better document.
Great.
So, Nigel, the code's been in a draft form for a period of time now, and up on our website, and we've been getting feedback from different stakeholders. And I understand we're sort of getting into the final stages of releasing the final code. And I just wondered, as far as once it's ready, when we talk about certification, what will a producer need to do to achieve the ANZBIG certification, and how do you see that sort of rolling out in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, look, you're right, Don. You know, we are in the sort of the final stages of. It's obviously there's been a lot of consultation and a lot of input into the code. It's a very important document. It's important that, you know, the producers of biochar see it as a document that they can use, and also important that, you know, our other stakeholders see the contents as being addressing their needs. So I think that the goal, obviously we put the code out, but the goal will be that producers will want to certify their product in accordance with the code. They'll want to be able to identify, well, this is premium grade biochar, or this is a standard grade biochar, and, you know, that they will provide that information on their products, and they will get that certified. So it's obviously a voluntary code, but hopefully producers will see the benefit of being certified, and, you know, consumers will see the benefit of buying certified products. So it's like all certification programs, it will start small, but if we produce something that is valuable for the stakeholders, it should grow. And so initially, with the certification program, you know, we will trial the program with producers to make sure that, you know, they're able to achieve what the code has outlined, and maybe there'll be a little bit of feedback that comes from that process that will flow back into the code. But I mean, that's important. We need to ensure that we produce the best document, best code that we can to help grow and develop the biochar sector in Australia and New Zealand. It's an important product, and, you know, we need to make sure that we give our stakeholders confidence regarding the quality of that product.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah. And you've been in the biochar game, I suppose, for a long time, Nigel, and you must have seen it develop quite a lot over the years in Australia and New Zealand. How do you feel? What are the hurdles of biochar being fully accepted into the industry from maybe when you started to now? And how do you see biochar production rolling out moving forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I could probably we could talk on this, Sam, for half a day.
Yeah.
But look, I think it's probably three main hurdles. I think number one is just momentum. It's always hard to get a new product out there, and I often talk about, well, most of our carbon is from fossil fuel that we use. So most of it is generated from oil and gas production, and carbon is in hundreds of products. You wouldn't believe how many products. A lot of products that have your black laptop, for example, has carbon to give it that color. There's an activated carbon market, which is a multi-billion-dollar market. There's a carbon black market, which is a multi-billion-dollar market. And a lot of that is based on fossil fuel inputs. So the thing with biochar is that it's a carbon input that is sustainable, or potentially sustainable if done right. And it's potentially a competing product to some applications of activated carbon, even some applications of carbon black, but it also has particular properties that are unique to biochar. So there's potentially some we'll find. So I think, like any new product, it takes time to develop those applications. And if you look at the history of carbon black and the history of activated carbon, you'll see that it's taken time for those sectors to grow and the applications of the product to be found. So I think momentum is a hard thing. And, we also know with ANZBIG that, we live in a very regulated society, and government moves incredibly slowly. So, to get biochar up there and people listening and moving with biochar just does take time. So that's one hurdle that we've had. The second hurdle, which is probably related to that hurdle, is supply, because the market is not clear cut and well developed, and it's hard raising capital and building a plant if they are unsure that there's a market there. So it's almost like a bit of a catch-22. So if there's no supply, then who's going to use the product? If they can't get, a guaranteed supply at a reasonable price, then that limits the growth of the biochar market. And then I think probably the third element is biochar is looked upon pretty much as one thing. If you look at activated carbon, there's hundreds of different grades of activated carbon, different properties, size, activation levels under a number of different measurement techniques. So biochar should be characterized with different properties for different applications, whether it be for livestock feed, or whether it be agricultural, or whether it be industrial use. So the code is going some way to trying to address some of those issues of specification and grades of biochar. But if we're here in a decade's time, we'll be amazed at how many different grades of biochar and the specialty uses that are there. So I think that they're probably the three main things there.
Great. And would you say that people just knowing about the uses of biochar as well, and the different applications and the different ways it can be used, like you just said, people maybe understand that activated carbon can be used in so many different ways now. Maybe there's a bit of education that needs to go into, hey, this is biochar, this is how it's made, and these are all the ways that it can be used.
Absolutely. There's a strong education piece right across the society, so that people are looking at the opportunities of biochar. But I think we're getting there. I think we are getting there, and more people are hearing the name. The reason why we're getting there is partly all the hard work that people are doing across the industry to show that biochar is a valuable product, and it can be used and in many ways, and that it is a more sustainable product than fossil fuel produced carbon. So I think that message is starting to hit home, but and there are a lot of projects there's a lot of projects on the drawing board to produce biochar. So I'm very excited and enthused by the future, to be honest, Sam.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, like as a biochar producer yourself, I can imagine it being an exciting time to be seeing how biochar, and even though you said that momentum is one of the hurdles, there seems to be the beginnings of a momentum of needing to find different ways to be able to help with a lot of issues that we have in the world, and biochar being one of those things that can really help a cross sector of different things that's going on. And I suppose, as a producer yourself, like, how do you see it rolling out in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, look, I think I think that production will increase, and I think that will lower the price of biochar, and that will mean that new markets will be found. We've been in the period of the true believers, and we need to move beyond that, so that it's a product that's recognised for what it can do and what it can't do. So biochar can't do everything, but it certainly is a very useful product, and I think that I think it's going to grow, and I think there's a lot of people interested in putting capital, finding homes for good sustainable investments. So there's a lot of money turning away from certain things and trying to find homes in good sustainable developments, and I think biochar is one of those. So I think the future looks bright, but what we have to do is make sure that it's done in a good way. So we don't want rogues and cowboys producing biochar unsustainably, using feedstocks that shouldn't be used, producing poor quality biochar. So that's where the code comes in.
Thanks, Nigel. Look, and finally, our theme for this podcast series and our annual conference coming up is Biochar and the Carbon Drawdown Decade. And we've just had an update from the IPCC report, which now is saying there's really a sense of urgency, and that the 1.5 degree mark may well be then reached in the 2030s. We thought it was more 2050. So finally, how can the code help with an increase in carbon drawdown, do you think?
Yes, Don. Well, that's pretty important, isn't it? And there is a sense of urgency, and I can certainly see, that urgency is probably translating more into action than what it's ever done. And I think what the code can do is, firstly, it has to give confidence to consumers to buy and use biochar. So that's one. Two, I think it needs, we live in a very regulated world in Australia and New Zealand, and there's a lot of reasons for that, to protect the environment, to protect health and safety. But we need to give regulators confidence to approve biochar production facilities. I think that's critical for us to grow that carbon drawdown from biochar. And biochar is a wonderful carbon drawdown product, because not only does it sequester carbon, but it actually utilizes, it can be utilized for different purposes. So when it's used in agriculture in the soil, it's sequestering carbon, but it's also improving the soil. So biochar is a fantastic product there. So we want regulators on side, basically seeing that biochar production is a good thing, fundamentally a good thing, if it's done in the right way. And that's what the code is trying to outline. And then three, I think, is those people that that are looking at financing good things, producing a carbon source which is non-fossil fuel, then they should get behind biochar production and help facilitate a biochar future.
Okay. Great, thanks, Nigel. Well, look, we'll wrap it up there doing it. And so, what's the best way to provide feedback on the code if it's still open?
Look, I think that the best way to provide feedback, Don, is to probably by email, and that email is to ANZBIG. Maybe marked code of practice. So get onto the ANZBIG website and email ANZBIG with your thoughts, and we want to hear from all stakeholders on what they think of the code as it is now and how it can be improved.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sam, our cluster manager, co-hosting today, and all the viewers and listeners for joining us. We hope you found it valuable. And so this interview is going to be uploaded into the ANZBIG's Vimeo and YouTube channels. And also you can subscribe to the Biochar podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So up next week at the same time, same channels, is the Vice Chair of ANZBIG, Peter Burgess, Managing Director of Rainbow Bee Eater, who will talk to the topic of biochar technology in protected cropping. And that's going to be under our topic area, food, fibre and recreation. So thanks again, Nigel, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Nigel.
Good to be involved.
Cheers.
Okay.